All right, greetings everyone. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification Training class. Welcome to everyone here and everyone tuned in on the internet. You can be seated if you're standing. Great to see everybody back. We're going to be continuing in the self-control unit. If you don't have a copy of it, a hard copy, you can always go. Obviously, you're already on Facebook if you're tuned in. You can, at the top of the page, there's a drop-down menu, and it's got the download for the books. Just click on where, the little arrow there, and it'll have a drop-down menu, and you'll see the self-control teacher manual. Go ahead and download that or open it up, and we're going to be continuing on where I left off last time on page 15 in the self-control unit. We left off in the middle of the page where it says straight talk, but I want to give just a little bit of quick review. On page 14, we talked about it's not just about you, but it's about controlling the way you think about others. And we learned that, thoughts are powerful. They're very powerful. And having negative thoughts about others can be just as dangerous as having negative thoughts about yourself. We learned that negative thoughts about others come from a variety of sources, and a lot of times people do things that don't set well with us, and they tend to get under our skin, and they might frustrate us, which is an emotion, it's a feeling. And we're going to learn more about emotions in the next chapter and feelings and how to control them to our advantage in chapter 2. But sometimes we get frustrated and we might perceive that their actions are unfair or mean. And then we start having these thoughts about that situation. Thoughts like, he's so stupid, or I hate her, she's such a jerk. And those are only, some examples, and those are probably the rated G examples. This is a family program. So without self-control, though, these kind of thoughts can lead to violent behavior. Not just violent behavior, but words, that are violent and hateful. Okay? Wars always begin with words, before they lead to the guns and knives and everything else. And when you don't have the self-control involved in this, these kind of thoughts can lead to violent behavior because they desensitize us to the fact that all people, even the ones that annoy us at times, deserve to be treated with respect, that they deserve to be shown with consideration, care, and concern. And then we learn that negative thoughts lead to physical or verbal abuse do not show care and concern, and they don't solve the problem. And that's really the main thing, is they don't solve any problems. There's no solution in that. There's no solution to the problem. And this is called the Peaceful Solution Program, and that's what we endeavor to do, is solve the problems using the techniques and things that we learn in here to give a solution where no one is harmed, whether with words, physically, mentally, emotionally, verbally, etc. Okay, so, and then we learned on the bottom of page 14, that we should have thoughts about other people that we would be willing to share openly. And then on page 15, we talked about how our mind is a powerful tool, and that we need our mind for all the things that we do, whether it's decision making, doing our jobs, raising families, making everyday decisions, etc. And we have to properly care for our mind in order for it to function at its best. And we talked about how, if your job is to build a house, but your saw is useless because it's been left out in the rain, it gets rusted and corroded, and you can't use it to cut the wood. Negative thoughts, it says, have the same effect. In the same way that rain can corrode metal, those negative thoughts can wear away our ability to make choices that are moral and respectful to ourselves and others. And remember that word ability, we'll remind ourselves and cover it again tonight about how ability is a synonym of the word power. These negative thoughts, they wear away our power. The negative thoughts, if we don't, remember what the Peaceful Solution taught, and we just cast the peaceful solution aside in that situation, then we're not using the power, the abilities that were given to us in the first two books, character and acceptance, in what kind of decision to make. Remember, it taught us what was right and wrong, what was moral and immoral. And if we don't use those things that we learned, we're throwing away our ability, basically, because really, if you think about it, who has the power to make our choices? Only us, right? We're the only ones that can choose whether to use the peaceful solution or just cast it aside in that situation. But it's really about training ourselves to remember the things and rehearse the things that we've already learned. That's why we frequently go back to the character unit to remind, when we see certain words or to remind of certain principles, we need to always keep going back there because the tendency is to forget. I think it was a Dale Carnegie course that said, if you hear a speech or you're given a class, the next day you only retain about 10 or 11% of what you heard. Now imagine, not reading the character unit for a few months and then trying to you're going to recall some things, but you're not going to recall, 95% of what you learned in that book. Okay, so we need to go back and constantly rehearse these things. All right, so we left off on page 15 in the middle on straight talk. And I think before we go any further, I just want to remind us on LP1F what we're doing in this exercise. If you'll notice number 5 on Lesson Plan 1, page F, number 5 doesn't mention anything about page 15. But remember, you've been told by the other teachers you need to cover it. It's inclusive, even though you don't see it. You should know that it's inclusive because when you go to the next step, it tells you to go to page 16. It doesn't tell you to start on 15. So it's implied that you need to do page 15 before you move on to the next step. And remember what we're learning in this particular step is that we talked about be your own best critic, not your worst. Having these negative thoughts. By the way, why don't you put up that first slide so I can show, something that Henry Ford said that really stuck in my mind when I heard somebody in the Peaceful Solution mention this one time, and I thought, that's an excellent, excellent quote. I wonder who said that. Well, Henry Ford, the maker of the automobile, the first, the Ford there, that's actually the first Ford automobile he's sitting in there. He said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. In other words, it's all in your mind. If you think you can do something and you apply what you've learned in the Peaceful Solution and give it your all, you can do it. On the other hand, if you want to be pessimistic, right, and think, I can't do that, and tell yourself these negative thoughts, well, then you're right. You're not going to do it. If you keep telling yourself these negative things, you're right. That's really all you're going to have coming is just the negative thoughts, but you're not going to get anywhere. Okay, so on page, we are also learning about, it says, explain to students that negative thoughts can lead to poor choices and a lack of respect for ourselves and others. Encourage students to keep our minds functioning at an optimal level by focusing on thoughts that can build a positive moral character. So in the middle of page 15, we'll go ahead and pick up. It says, an important part of developing self-control is learning to think in a way that promotes true moral values and is respectful toward yourself and others. Now again, true moral values. Where did we learn about moral values? Well, we learned about it in the character unit, right? And I believe right at the very beginning here of the character unit, it talked about morals and values. Values are what you believe in or feel strongly about, and they also play a key role in developing your character. And then we learned about what's called moral values, okay? As you mature and grow, your parents share their values with you just like their parents shared their values with them. The things they care about and consider as important are for the most part the same things you care about. And then it talks about the influences in our lives and where our values came from, family members, babysitters, teachers, and others all help to shape our character by sharing their values with us. And then on page 8 of the character unit, it talked about moral values. It says, regardless of culture, religion, or environment, there are some values that all people share. They are called moral values. In other words, a brother might value going to the library, and his sister might value staying at home and reading. And those are just values. But moral values, all people share. Okay, a moral value is like a line that divides right behavior from wrong behavior. It says people from all walks of life, young or old, big or small, rich or poor, share some of the same basic concepts of moral values. You know, everybody believes you shouldn't steal. People believe you shouldn't lie or cheat. You know, that no one wants to be cheated. No one wants to be lied to or stolen from or abused or assaulted or name called, and etc. There's certain moral values that everyone shares, no matter where they are and what gender they are, etc., or what religion. Okay, so back to page 15. It says, positive thoughts encourage you to build your character and continually strive toward excellence. Positive thoughts about others remind you that as human beings, they are worthy of respect. You do not have to resort to thinking negatively about someone because he or she has hurt your feelings and has been unkind to you. Thinking negative thoughts about that individual will not solve the problem. Again, you know, remember, all that negative thoughts do is just wear away your ability to be respectful to that person. You start being desensitized to where you think that that person doesn't deserve to be treated like a human being. And remember that word desensitized. I showed it in the glossary on page 231. The word desensitized means to lose the ability to be caring and concerned for the safety and well-being of someone else. Okay? Now, thinking negative thoughts will not solve the problem. It will only cause resentment and hate. And as you will see later on in this unit, resentment and hate can be a deadly combination. In fact, the next chapter we'll see some examples of people that didn't control their emotions, and, you know, some of them pay a hefty price, you know, whether it's life in prison, whether it's death, etc., or other consequences. So now let's go back to LP1F, and let's look at step number 6. And it says, stress to students that as they learn to control their thoughts about themselves and others, they need to understand the role choices play in practicing self-control. So we're going to learn about choices or decisions. Instruct students to turn to page 16 through 19 and read the section entitled, It's a Matter of Choice, and complete the exercises. Emphasize that self-control means taking the time to weigh all the options or choices and make the best possible morally acceptable decision. Okay? So we're going to learn about the role of self-control in making choices. Okay? And let's go ahead and turn to page 16. I got a lot to say about choices because this is a really huge part of the peaceful solution that we need to understand. You know, I remember when I first started learning the peaceful solution, this was a real eye-opener right here about choices, because I used to often think that I really didn't have a choice on how I reacted to certain situations. You know, I kind of felt like, well, you know, if this guy's jerking my chain, I have to react like this. You know, I don't have any choice but to act like this, or I don't have any choice but to pop him in his mouth or talk back to him or let him know how I feel. Because after all, that's what everybody does, you know, in the cartoons or in the movies or, you know, etc. Those were the examples that I saw, you know, so I thought, well, isn't that just how people react? If somebody does something wrong to them, they do something wrong in return. But really, no, we have a choice, but we have to be educated about what our choices are, what our decisions can be. Before I start, let's go ahead and read the first couple lines. It says, the next important step in developing self-control is understanding the role of choices in the way you think, feel, and act. Now, underline this, please. A choice is the power. There's that word again. A choice is the power to make a selection between one or more options. Every day we make choices. Every day. Now, how many decisions do you think you make every day? Why don't you put up the next slide? Let's get kind of an idea, because this is really a eye-popping, eye-opening statistic here. This is from Psychology Today. How many decisions do we make each day? The number of choices is hard to estimate, but it's higher than you expect. This article's from 2018. And I just took one quote, or a couple quotes out of here I thought were interesting. It says, some sources suggest that the average person makes an eye-popping 35,000 choices per day. You see that? You might think that's a lot, but listen. But does this enormous figure really hold up? You just spent about 50 seconds reading the first paragraphs of this blog. In theory, you should have made 25 decisions since choosing to give this post a try. In reality, that number seems counterintuitive, if not outright silly. Chances are you won't recall making any decisions at all during this short space of time. But didn't you make a quick judgment whether or not to carry on reading after the first sentence? Didn't you decide to ignore a smartphone notification, or take a sip of coffee, or reposition yourself, scratch your arm, suppress a yawn, pick your nose? Do you understand? These are all decisions. These are decisions we make. We don't even think about some of these decisions that we're making, okay? But they're saying that, you're making upwards of 35,000 decisions a day, or choices a day. And some of them are just, whether to move your arm, or whether to look at that book, or what you're looking at, or what you're listening to, etc. These are all decisions that you're making, but you're making them so quickly, and you're making them so, it's like you're on autopilot. You're not even really thinking about it. But that's a lot of choices that we're making there, okay? Now, it says every day we make choices. We choose which thoughts to focus on and which to let go. You choose to get up in the morning and what you will eat for breakfast, or even if you will eat breakfast. And they were saying that, well, for about 7 hours of sleep, you're not really making any choices in your sleep. But I beg to differ with that, because I wake up frequently at night and decide whether to roll on my left side, my right side. I make a lot of decisions even in the middle of the night. Probably even in my dreams I'm making decisions, right? So we're constantly, just think about this, how many decisions you're actually making without even realizing, or not being consciously aware that you're making the decision. You're just thinking that you're deciding, what you're going to have for supper tonight, what you're going to entertain yourself with, etc. But you're making choices constantly. They say about 2 choices a second, or 2 choices every 2 seconds, or something like that. So it says some options or choices in life are harmless and have no significant consequences. For example, it doesn't matter if you choose to wear your red sweater or your blue sweater to school. The color of your sweater will not cause harm to you or someone else. Well, can you go to the next slide? Did you know that in school, a lot of schools, you can't wear certain colors? So you can't wear your Dodger blue sweater or your 49er red shirt in certain schools because they're considered gang related. So they won't allow you to wear them. Let me read this to you. This is from the Sonoma Valley Sun. This is the California paper. It says, for a long time, Sonoma Valley High School's dress code simply banned the colors Dodger blue and 49er red, which are often associated with street gangs. However, this policy has drawn criticism, especially from students who claim the school is inconsistent in enforcing it. Last school year, the policy was updated to only prohibit red and blue in solid color form, while also banning a predominance of any color. Apparently, anybody who comes to school wearing all pink is part of a gang now, too. So what this student in his op-ed was saying there in that paper was, you know, the school was banning all these different colors. You can't wear certain colors to school, any solid colors, etc., because they consider it being gang related. So notice, it affects your choice. It affects that choice to wear that color. If it's not allowed, it could get you in trouble. It could get you expelled from school, right? If you choose to go against the rule. So the color of your sweater this shouldn't be a big deal, right? This is what the peaceful solution is saying. Should it really be a big deal what color sweater you choose to wear? Of course not. But guess what? Now, certain people say, well, you can't wear that color because, you know, the gangs, that's gang related. So you can't wear that color to school. But really what it's saying is, for the most part, it doesn't matter what color sweater you wear, right? Okay, now, some choices, however, are major and can lead to serious consequences. For example, the choice to experiment with drugs. Notice, that's a choice to experiment with drugs, can impair your ability to think clearly and logically and can lead to addiction. So let's look at a couple words. Let's go to the next slide here. It says it can impair your ability. So let's look at the word impair. The word impair means to weaken or damage something, especially a human faculty, like your thought process or your brain, or functions. So it weakens or damages. That's what the word impair means. And it says the choice to experiment with drugs can impair your ability or your power. Notice, you're taking your power away. You're reducing your strength. That word ability means possession of the means or skill to do something. Possession of the means or skill to do something. So if your brain is on drugs, right? Do you think you're going to be thinking about the peaceful solution and all the things that you were taught in those books? No, you might think about it. I remember telling you a story one time where a couple guys were in a drug house and they wanted to kill each other until they found out each other took the peaceful solution. And they're like, you know, the guy's like, you know, I really wanted to hurt you, man, but that peaceful solution's the only thing that's keeping me from killing you right now. And he goes, oh, you took it too? And they actually became friends because of that. This is no joke, okay? They were high at the time, so they did think of the peaceful solution, but you think that with a mind that's impaired, that's weakened, that they're going to remember, that they're going to have the ability to fully make a right decision in that case? Of course not. You know, because what you're doing is you're weakening the peaceful solution. The peaceful solution gave you the ability to make a right choice. It showed you how to make a right choice. But if we weaken ourselves with drugs, alcohol, overdrinking, etc., or any kind of immoral behavior, it wears out our ability to think clearly and logically, and it can lead to addiction. Okay? Remember the word power in the next slide. Power means ability. Remember we showed that last time. It means ability or control. Remember we're talking about self-control. And it means legal power or authority, you know, which the peaceful solution gives you the authority to make these right choices. It gives you the permission to make the right choices. It shows you how to make the right choices, what's right and what's wrong. But we have to take it to ourselves and use it. We've got to apply it in these situations that we find ourselves in. Okay, so let's continue here in the reading. Now it says, this boy down here at the bottom of the page, he's looking in his closet. This young man, he's saying, should I wear my red sweater or my green one? With my black or khaki pants? With my loafers or sneakers? Maybe my baseball hat or sweatband. So he's deciding, you know, what he wants. He's choosing, he's deciding, he's making a choice what to wear that day. Now, if he goes to Sonoma Valley High School, is it going to make a difference what sweater he wears? Yeah, it is, because the rule says at the school you can't wear a solid color. You can't wear Dodger blue and you can't wear 49er red. So it will affect, his choice will affect what kind of day he ends up having that day, right? What about here? He's sitting here and he's thinking about, what should I eat for breakfast? I could have eggs with toast or maybe grits and sausage. How about some oatmeal and OJ? But French toast sure sounds great. Well, what it's showing is, these are the kind of choices we make every day. And some choices we make are completely harmless, but some choices have a huge effect. Even the choice, remember, the things we eat are an influence. We learned that in the character unit. The things that we eat are an influence. Food is an influence. Food, whatever foods we decide to take in, if we're eating a lot of junk food and we're not eating healthy food, it has an effect on the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we act. Okay? If we're not eating healthy, it's going to have an effect on our body and our mind. And your mind and body, as we're going to learn in chapter 2 here in the self-control unit, they both have to be balanced. Your body has to be balanced in order for your mind to work properly. Your mind has to be healthy and balanced for your body to work properly. They both go hand in hand. So food can have an effect on the choices we make and how our brain functions. Remember, we want our brain to function at an optimal level. Okay? That's why they have a school lunch program, actually, because a lot of children, they found out, were not eating breakfast in the morning at home, and they were coming to school hungry, and they couldn't really function. You got to have food to keep your brain active and functioning. If you're hungry, it's going to be very difficult to learn. Okay? So they started a school lunch program. Well, and I'm not saying the school lunch program food's very healthy either, okay? I remember those eggs, those eggs that you used to give us when I was in school. Some of the food wasn't very tasty, for sure, but nonetheless, they understood the importance of eating and keeping our brain functioning at an optimal level. Okay, so let's now look at page 17. Oh, wait, on the bottom of page 16, it says, be careful of the choices you make. Some choices you will only get to make one time. What about like the choice to use drugs? Do you realize that some people have overdosed on drugs and died the first time they tried them? Others went through their whole life and didn't die or didn't overdose from drugs, but I guarantee you, when they had their heart attack or whatever they died from, they like to say they died of natural causes. All those choices they made to use drugs, it contributed in some way to their death, to their demise. Their choices contributed to their demise. Okay? Don't let them fool you. You can't just think, well, the body, eventually your body wears out and you die, Well, yeah, but the choices we make are going to have a huge bearing on how long that takes. Okay? So we have to really be educated on making right choices, whether it's what we eat, how we conduct ourselves with other people, etc. So on page 17, it says choices or options can basically be placed into two categories, negative or positive. Here's a few points to help you distinguish or tell the difference between a positive and a negative choice. So first we're going to go over negative options. Notice they keep switching words here. They're saying option here, but they're saying choice over here. That's because they're interchangeable. Option, choice, decision, judgment, it's all the same. You're making judgments every day. If you judge that you should stay away from a certain person because of the way they're behaving, that they're doing things that you don't want to get caught up in, like possibly they're using drugs or they're drinking, and you're not supposed to be doing any of those things. Here you're a junior high student, and even if you were an adult, you shouldn't be doing the over drinking or the drugs. You're making a choice, whether you're making a decision or a choice or a judgment to not hang out with that person unless and until they change their behavior. Okay, that's a decision. That's a judgment that you're making. You're actually sitting as a judge in your life. You're making decisions, okay, whether they're positive or whether they're negative. Okay, so People used to tell me, well, I don't judge anyone. Okay. so, so if you don't judge anyone, does that mean that if someone's a child molester, that you would just let them come in your house? If you knew they were a child molester, would you just let them in your house to play with your children? Of course not. I wouldn't do that. Well, why not? I said you said you didn't judge. Right? People don't understand what the word judge means. There's making decisions, like everyday decisions, judging whether you should do or not do something. But then there's judging someone to condemn that person, like saying, well, that person's never going to change. Like some of the judges used to tell me, you're incorrigible. You're never going to change. Right? You're the worst offender. Well, I probably was. I probably was the worst offender. But to call me incorrigible, that means to say that I'm irredeemable and I can never change? Really? You should make that judgment? How do we know if somebody can? We already know that people can change, don't we? If they get the information and they're given the opportunity, they got the right teacher, the right environment, the right teacher, the right information, the peaceful solution, anybody can change. I remember the author said, you can take some guy slinging dope out there on the street with his pants sagging down, and you can actually teach him the peaceful solution, and he could straighten up. He just needs information. It's information. He just needs the information. He needs the opportunity, right? We all need the opportunity, that's all. And that judge, he didn't give me the opportunity because he didn't know about the peaceful solution. Now, I found out about the peaceful solution while I was in prison, and then I was given the opportunity to learn it and practice it, and it worked. But people were really great at telling me I could never change, but they weren't giving me any information to change, So, it's not proper to make that judgment to condemn somebody and say they can't change when you haven't done anything to give them that opportunity. Okay, so now it says negative options. Negative options are immoral. It has the potential to cause harm because it has no regard for anyone's life, property, or the environment. Remember what we learned in the character unit about moral. Moral means it doesn't bring harm to yourself, others, property, or the environment. Okay, so teasing others, stealing, and vandalism are examples of immoral choices. I think a lot of us know what teasing's about. We went over it in the acceptance unit and even in the character unit. And we know that stealing, we still don't fully understand what stealing is, but we have a pretty great idea what stealing is. I want to talk a little bit about vandalism. I remember one time I was teaching a class in a jail. We have a prison program. I was teaching a class in a jail, and I was teaching about, I was in the one of the units. I think it was the Building Moral Excellence unit, and it talked about, graffiti and, not destroying other people's property and how that is stealing, right? And I came to class one day. When I came into the classroom, I saw on some of the desks that people had, some people in the classroom had written their names on the desk while I was teaching the class, probably, right? And that's the thing about vandalism or graffiti. A lot of times they leave their signature and they tell you they did it. They tell on themselves, Joe was here, 2022, or Lisa loves Jeff, right? Or, so it's kind of obvious who did it, right? It's kind of obvious. They like to tell on themselves. But they were actually doing this stuff while they were learning in the class, because remember, they still needed more information, even though I had told them that. Some of them were still doing it because it's habitual. People go into public restrooms. Oh, well, I'm jumping ahead of myself. I'll show you that here in a minute. Let's go ahead and look at this next slide. Let's talk about vandalism. You ever wonder where that word came from? Now, vandalism, according to online etymology dictionary, that's where words come from. It means willful destroyer of what is beautiful or venerable. And it comes from Vandals. That's the name of the Germanic tribe that sacked Rome in 455. Yeah. I don't know if you know what a sacking is, but they go in and pretty much just destroy everything and steal everything. So these vandals, this Germanic people, went into Rome, and notice some of the things they were stealing. You know, it shows they were setting fires. I see some big old candlestick looking thing they stole. It looks like they stole some people, you know. So they sacked Rome in 455, these Vandals. The Vandals were a Germanic people who first inhabited what is now southern Poland. So now you know where the word Vandals comes from. Let's look at the word further here in the next slide. Let's look at some of the vandalism here. Now, some people would call that art, right? You know, like you're sitting at a stoplight or a train crossing, and you see a train go by, and you see nothing but writing, like you see in that middle picture. You know, all that art on that train. That's a new train. That's a fairly new looking train. How much do you think each one of those cars cost? Those box cars on that train, or those that looks like a passenger train. How much do you think just one of those costs the person that owns that? Hundreds of thousands of dollars, I would say. Now, do you think the person that owns that appreciates that? Do you think they look at that and go, "Man, that's beautiful, whoever did that. They're really great with a spray paint can." Do you think they were like looking at it and thinking, "Man, I need to find out who did that so I can hire him to spray paint my house"? No, but you're looking at it differently because it don't belong to you, so you're probably looking at it and going, "Wow, that's pretty cool, man, whoever did that." But you know what? That's called stealing. That's called vandalism. It's called destroying property that does not belong to you. And by the way, I don't know why they called it vandalism, because Rome was sacked 7 times by Visigoths, the Goths. The Vandals were only one tribe that sacked them. So I don't know why they got the bad rap, but nonetheless, that's what they got stuck with. Look at this other vandalism. You see this park vandalism? You see those cement benches where somebody broke? Looks like they took a sledgehammer and broke those seats. Now, who do you think pays for those benches in that city park? The city? The city don't have a dime. Where does the city get their money from? You, the taxpayer. That's correct. We're paying for that right there. And I would venture to guess that the guys that are doing that, they probably don't even think about that and consider that, you know, because they haven't been to the peaceful solution class. So they're not realizing that every time they destroy public property, they pay in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Okay? But these are all things you learn as you get into the peaceful solution. Let's go back to that slide, please. I wasn't done. Some people just like to do things, to destroy things, to be funny, like you see on this. There's some kind of banner here about getting a medical test, and it says, "This year, thousands of men will die from stubbornness," and somebody spray painted, "No, we won't." Right? Now, look at that bathroom. Yes, that's a bathroom, the bottom right. That looks like everyone in the world signed their name in that bathroom. That is a bathroom, a public bathroom. That's how people treat things that don't belong to them. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think if you go to their house and use their bathroom that it looks like that? Why is that? Why is it that people like to write on other people's bathroom walls, but they don't do it on their own? Figured that out yet? You ever thought about it? Why do they think nothing about doing it in a public stall, in a public restroom, but at home they wouldn't dare do something like that to destroy their property? Now, what do you think would occur if they came to their bathroom and they saw someone had written for a great time call, 999-666-6666? How do you think they would feel about that? What do you think they would do? Do you think they'd be taking pictures and posting it on Facebook and laughing about it? Or do you think they'd be upset? Well, of course they would, because it's their property. They'd be upset about it. Okay, so vandalism is an immoral choice. It's not a right choice. Let me show you one other example of vandalism a little closer to home here. Let's look at the next slide. This is from Dallas-Fort Worth In 2012, this article, this popped up when I put in vandalism. This is in Romney, Texas, which is just right over here a few miles away. It says, in the article, it said a highway sign for the Eastland County community of Romney has been vandalized. Obama was spray painted in black on the sign for the small unincorporated community. NBC5 viewer Carolyn McNaught sent in a photo of the vandalized sign. She called the vandalism shameful, saying it was not a good way to show political support. Now, if you remember in 2012 when this took place, Romney was challenging Obama for the presidency. So somebody thought, I guess, well, here's a great way to show some political support. I'll just write Obama over Romney there, right? Now, to us, that might seem a little bit funny, right? Silly. But who had to pay to replace that sign? The taxpayers, the people of this, I don't know, the unincorporated, I don't know if an unincorporated city even has the funding to be able to buy a new sign. I don't know who ended up paying for it, but somebody did. I guarantee they had to replace it. So those are just some of the examples of, vandalism, okay? And we can't think, it might seem funny to us when we see it like we see it there, but until it occurs to us, when it occurs to us, we won't think it's funny, okay? We won't think any of that stuff is funny if somebody did that to our property. That's an immoral choice because it brings harm and it has no regard for someone else's property, no respect, no, not even a thought that, hey, this doesn't belong to me. I don't have the permission to do that, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. Okay? So that's a negative option. We should never choose to do something like that. The second point here, a negative option is chosen out of ignorance or in haste without getting all the facts to make an intelligent decision. For example, you assume that someone is talking badly about you, and without getting all the facts, you choose to ignore them in retaliation. Now, we're going to learn in I believe it's in chapter 3, about assuming or jumping to conclusions and how it causes conflicts when we do that, when we make judgments or decisions without all the information, okay? But even if they were talking about us, is giving them the cold shoulder and ignoring them and getting even with them by ignoring them, is that going to solve the problem? Is that the right decision? Is that the right choice? To retaliate? Remember what the word retaliate means, Just think of the word tally, it's like keeping score. Okay, you got 1 point, now I got 1 point. It's like tit for tat, you're trying to get one up on somebody. That's not going to bring peace. That's not the peaceful solution. And we're going to learn better ways to handle that in chapter 3. But remember, a negative choice, it's chosen out of ignorance, not having all the information, okay? Ignorance is not a bad word. It just means we don't know, or we're ignoring the information that's available, because sometimes we think to ourselves, well, I don't want to know about that, because if I know, then I'm going to be responsible. So I don't want to know. I don't want to read about the dangers of that, because if I read about it, then I'll be thinking about it when I'm doing it, and I won't have fun anymore. Right? Now, let's go to the next slide. I want to show you how important it is to get information before you make a choice. And I'm not promoting money, but you need money to live. You don't need this much money, but nonetheless, here's your choice. You have a choice. I'm going to give you a choice. I'm going to give you $1 million in cash right now today. There it is, right there. That is actually $1 million right there. And those are $100 bills. Okay? I'll give you $1 million right now today, or I will give you 1 penny today, and I'll double it every day for 30 days. You make your choice. Which one do you want right now? Some of you probably already know this. That's why you're saying that. When I first heard this, I said, man, that's a no-brainer. Are you serious? I'll take the $1 million today. Are you kidding? But I didn't have all the information at that time. Now I know better because I've been informed. I know. 1 penny and double it every day for 30 days does not sound like a lot. But if you took the $1 million, here's what you gave up. you lost $4,368,709.12 because you didn't wait 30 days. Because on day 1, you would have got a penny. Day 2, you'd have got 2 cents. Day 10, you're only getting $5.12. Day 15, you're only getting $163.84. But by day 27, you're going to get $671,088.64. And then for the next 3 days, you're going to see it increase huge. By day 30, you're going to have $5,368,709.12. Now, that's also, there's what they call the marshmallow test. Remember, I'm going to give you 1 marshmallow, but if you wait 30 minutes, I'm going to give you 2 marshmallows, right? So this is really also a test of self-control. Can you wait 30 days? Well, if you did the math in your mind and you figured it out, you could say, yeah, I could wait 30 days because I'm going to get $4,368,709.12 more. But if you just made it in haste, like quickly, a quick decision just based on what you thought, because you thought $1 million versus pennies, forget it. It's an easy choice. This is what you would have gave up. And you know what they say? Let's go to the next slide. Here's the brain having a conversation with the heart. The brain says, oh, you had a feeling, did you? A feeling? In other words, what do you think you should be going by? Your feelings or the facts? Yeah, don't let your heart override your brain at times there, Sometimes you might feel a certain way, but the facts say something different. You need to get the facts because as we learn in the peaceful solution, let's go to the next slide. Remember what we learned in the character unit on page 172? It was actually hidden. It was like a hidden gem there. It was in the beginning of the book, but it's also at the very end of the book where it says, remember this. Basing your decisions on facts, not emotions, is what builds true moral character. You are better able to make a perfect decision when you gather all the facts than a person who only has a portion of the facts. And in the case of somebody offering you $1 million and versus the 1 penny doubled a day for a month, and you make that decision in haste without getting all the facts, this is what you would have lost. It's just one illustration, but there's many, many illustrations of things you can actually choose to do without thinking it through, and you're really losing out on a lot because you didn't think about it. You didn't get all the information you needed in order to make a perfect choice or an informed choice. By the way, I want to stop there. Y'all know what $1 trillion looks like in $100 bills? Because, you hear about all these, they're throwing $1 trillion out there, stimulus money and things like that, $1 trillion, or we just added another trillion to the debt. Can you put up the next slide so people can see what $1 trillion in $100 bills looks like? Those are pallets, and they're stacked quite high, and they're 3 football fields long. You see they got a 747 parked there to kind of give you an idea what it looks like. That's the Capitol grounds there, the Senate buildings and the Congressional building and the Capitol building there. And those are all pallets of $100 bills. Stacked higher than that man's head. Half as high as that semi truck right there. And that's $1 trillion. That is all like stacks of $100 bills. Can you go to the next slide? This is how much self-control we don't have. Just the other day, on February 1st, 2022, the United States national debt surpassed $30 trillion for the first time. Now, here's an illustration of $30 trillion in U.S. debt. There's the Statue of Liberty in the background there. Those pallets are stacked higher than the Statue of Liberty. You see all those? Those are all like office skyscrapers, pallets of $100 bills. That's how much we owe. And guess what? They've got another bill coming down the pike right now, another $2 trillion. Hey, why not? We're already 30 trillion in debt, right? Really? This is self-control? Wow. Dave Ramsey, they need to listen to that guy. He said, act your wage. You don't spend more than you have, okay? Just the interest alone on this $30 trillion, I don't know how much that is, but it's quite a bit. All right, so let me continue. I just want to kind of give you an idea of, what money looks like when I know they use trillion like they sling it around a lot, but it's a lot of money, folks. Okay, so the third point, it says, a negative option is showing disrespect for authority. It disregards the position of one who's in charge and responsible for you. Parents and teachers are examples of authority figures. Okay? And most people, if you ask them what authority is, we learn in the Peaceful Solution, in the very early grades, an authority is anyone who's responsible for or in charge of you. And it doesn't have to be a parent or a teacher. It could be a coach. It could be a babysitter. It could be your big brother, if your parents leave them in charge, or your big sister. Anybody that's responsible for and in charge of you. But did you also consider that the Peaceful Solution is your authority? Or any rules that are posted in your school, those are authority. Those are authority. A rule is an authority. Even though it's not a person, it's still authority. Now, a lot of people choose to disregard the rules. They choose to disregard the fact that it says no chewing gum in the classroom. And they'll go ahead and chew gum anyway. They disregard the rule. They don't show regard or respect for the rule. Even though the rule, remember what rules are made for? To keep us safe, right? Okay. Now, if you've ever been in a classroom of children chewing gum, you'll know what I'm talking about when you put your finger under the desk. It's usually some gum stuck under there, right? Or you end up walking on it on the floor and it gets all over your sneakers, and you're picking gum out of your shoe for 30 days, right? It's nasty, okay? Because people don't usually spit it out in the trash can. They spit it out everywhere they shouldn't spit it out, right? But nonetheless, the rule's there for our safety. And it's not very, you think about it, if somebody put the gum under the desk and you touch the gum, you can get somebody's germs on your hands, some kind of, disease from that gum, too. It's not just the gum, okay? It's been in someone's mouth, right? So, the Peaceful Solution is an authority, it's rules. Remember, morals are rules. So morals are an authority. Now, we can choose to disregard those rules. That means push them aside, pretend we never heard them, or conveniently forget them because, after all, this situation, well, that's above the Peaceful Solution. This guy, I'll follow the Peaceful Solution when it says do not steal, but man, this guy right here just called me a name. He just called my mama something, and that's it, right? Oh no, we can't pick and choose when we follow the Peaceful Solution. We got to follow it all the time. So remember, don't disregard the fact that authority can be rules too, not just a person. Show regard for the authority. Show regard for the rules. In other words, even if you don't understand the rule, should you just disregard it because you don't understand it? No, just follow it, and eventually you will understand why the rule's there. Okay, so the final negative option is disobeying the rules. Blatantly disregarding the rules and choosing not to follow instructions given, just like I said. For example, choosing to talk when the classroom rule is to be quiet during instruction disrupts the learning process. In other words, you're stealing someone's ability, your neighbor sitting next to you or other children in the classroom, you're stealing their ability to learn from the teacher. You're robbing them of their opportunity to get educated. That's what they came to school for. They didn't come to school to listen to you play around with your friends. Now, who else do you think you're stealing from when you're talking during class? Just your friends and the people around you? Who else? The teacher? The teacher is the authority. And we're actually stealing that teacher's authority and her opportunity to educate without having to correct and stop and forget where she was. I mean, I know what it's like, when you're teaching a class and, Kramer walks in the door, Nobody knows who Kramer is. Children in the front know who Kramer is? You remember Kramer on Seinfeld, he used to just walk in Jerry's door. Him and Elaine were sitting there on the couch, and Jerry would just walk right in. He'd open the door up and make his presence known, and he'd go straight to the refrigerator and open Jerry's refrigerator. Start taking Jerry's drinks and Jerry's food out of the fridge. And the audience would be hooting and howling, and, it was comedy, right? It was supposed to be funny, but the fact is the man was stealing. He was stealing privacy. He was stealing Jerry's authority over his house, just walking right in the door, right? But we were trained to laugh about it. We were trained to think it was funny that he was breaking the rules. Just like we were trained to think that's funny watching that vandalism, right? Okay, so for example, choosing to talk in the class rule is to be quiet. It disrupts the learning process. So we need to choose to do what's right and follow the rules, whether we understand the rules or not. They're for our safety and for keeping things decent and in order. Okay, keeping things orderly. It says all negative choices have consequences. Some consequences can be immediate, while others might be delayed and not seen until later in life. Read the following negative choices and use the line to write the possible consequences. First of all, let me show you my last slide here about this consequences, this etymology of the word consequence. Put up that last slide, please. Consequence, it means result, or that which follows from or grows out of any action or course. So a consequence can start with the way we think, right? First we have thoughts. Our thoughts lead to feelings. Our feelings lead to actions. And then the result or the consequence. That which follows, remember, that which follows or grows out of any act or course, like a course of thinking. If you don't change the course of your thinking, if it's negative thinking, and you don't alter the course and get rid of the negative thought, well, the consequence is going to be, something negative because you didn't alter it to something positive, okay? You can think of it like writing, first, next, then, and then finally. The consequence would be the finally. The first would be the thought. The next would be the feeling. The then would be the actions, and then finally the consequence. So think about that. Consequence of bullying. Well, it could be hurting someone physically or verbally and being kicked out of school. Could be a lot worse, too. Haven't we seen school shootings? I remember in school it was always, I'll meet you out in the parking lot. I call you out. I'm talking like the 70s and 80s, fist fights, pull out knives or whatever else. So it could be a lot worse. It could be somebody getting seriously hurt or even killed, and even innocent bystanders. What about sniffing glue? Sniffing glue can damage your brain cells so you can't think clearly, okay? Like I showed you the other night about the glitches, I used to sniff glue. I used to huff hairspray. I used to do all that stuff, okay? I tried probably everything at least once when it comes to drugs, and I'm paying for it. Still, to this day, there's consequences for my actions. What about refusing to participate in PE class? Well, you could be sent to the principal's office, fail the class, get in-school suspension. What about stealing someone's wallet? How about the consequences for stealing a wallet? Well, you could be branded as a thief, suffer from guilt, and depriving the owner of his money. Those are just some of the consequences that negative options like disobeying the rules, showing disrespect for authority, not getting all the facts to make intelligent decisions. That's what can take place when we choose or an immoral option. Anything that shows disregard for life, property, and the environment, like teasing, stealing, and vandalism, all that's going to bring negative consequences to our life. So we got to start training our mind Just cut off the thought at the source, the thought. We got to change our thoughts. And I'm sure in the following classes, I think Katan's up next. Katan will be teaching the next class. It'll be on what, 2:20? 2:20, Sunday, 2:20 at 5:30 p.m. Katan will be teaching the class, and I'm sure he'll be getting into these things. He'll be picking up on page 18, which is a positive option brings rewards. And I want to encourage you all to be thinking about, the things that we learned tonight about negative options and how a negative option should never be an option for a Peaceful Solution Character Education Program student or student teacher, right? And thank you for joining us tonight. We hope to see you again on Sunday the 20th at 5:30 Central Standard Time. Have a great evening.